Before I met Carolyn, my life was a chaotic mess, a legacy of my parents' toxic relationship. My mother's violent outbursts and my father's silent suffering left me scarred, vowing never to repeat their mistakes. So when Carolyn entered my life, I didn't just fall in love, I became a detective, meticulously dissecting every aspect of her existence for 2 painstaking years. I analyzed how she handled stress, treated waiters at restaurants, managed money, and even reacted during arguments with friends. She passed every test with flying colors, compassionate, patient, and seemingly perfect. I thought I had cracked the code to a flawless marriage. Little did I know, this obsession with perfection would later become the foundation of my greatest nightmare. Carolyn wasn't just a partner, she was my redemption story. I told myself that after decades of dysfunction, I had finally broken the cycle of abuse and chaos. I believed so deeply in her goodness that I ignored subtle warning signs, the occasional coldness, the way she dismissed therapy as unnecessary. But hindsight is cruel. What I saw as diligence was actually naivety wrapped in desperation. Every moment I spent scrutinizing her felt like an investment in our future happiness, but it was more like building a house on quicksand. The cracks were there, hidden beneath layers of charm and carefully crafted smiles. And when the facade crumbled, it took everything I held sacred with it. That obsessive caution, which I once thought was my shield, turned into the very thing that blinded me. The moment I pushed open the bedroom door, my entire world imploded. There she was, Carolyn, the woman I had vowed to love forever, tangled up with another man on our bed. Between them lay scattered purple orchids, their delicate petals crushed beneath his feet like a cruel metaphor for what remained of our marriage. The flowers I had bought just hours earlier, those expensive blooms meant to symbolize renewal and hope, now mocked me from the floor. Then came the deafening crash, my phone slipping from my trembling hand, hitting the hardwood with a sound so sharp it felt like it shattered more than glass. It broke every illusion I'd ever held about us. Carolyn's face turned pale as her eyes locked onto mine, but they weren't filled with guilt or shame. Instead, there was raw panic, not because she regretted her actions, but because she feared being caught. She scrambled to cover herself, though her movements were oddly deliberate, almost mechanical. It was as if she wasn't trying to hide her infidelity but rather tidy up the mess before facing me. Her lover, this stranger who dared invade my home, tried to act nonchalant, pulling on his clothes with an arrogance that made my blood boil. But Carolyn's demeanor shifted in a way that still haunts me. Within seconds, the fear in her eyes dissolved into something colder, harder, a mask of indifference that sent chills down my spine. As I stood frozen, grappling with disbelief, Carolyn began adjusting her bra strap, smoothing out her hair, and even taking a moment to reapply her lipstick using the mirror I'd gifted her last Christmas. That mirror, a token of love now twisted into a tool of betrayal. Her calmness was unnatural, surreal, as if nothing significant had happened. And then, as if the universe hadn't already conspired against me, she spoke. "You weren't supposed to be back," she snapped, her voice dripping with irritation, as though I were the intruder ruining her afternoon escapade. Her audacity stunned me. Here I was, clutching the remnants of my shattered heart, while she blamed me for interrupting what she clearly viewed as harmless fun. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the monster standing before me. How could someone switch identities so effortlessly? One moment, she was the devoted wife who left sweet notes in my lunchbox. The next, she was this callous stranger accusing me of ruining her day. Every word she uttered felt like another blow, each one landing heavier than the last. And yet, despite the chaos swirling around us, the crushed flowers, the lingering scent of cologne mingling grotesquely with her perfume, the deafening silence between us, Carolyn remained eerily composed. She avoided my gaze, focusing instead on fixing her appearance as though preparing for a photo shoot rather than confronting the husband she had betrayed. Her casual dismissal of the situation was more devastating than any insult. To her, I was no longer a person, I was an inconvenience, a wrench in her carefully planned affair. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, Carolyn revealed a side of herself that was more calculating and vindictive than I ever imagined. It wasn't enough for her to destroy our marriage, she seemed determined to dismantle every aspect of my life in the process. First, she froze our joint bank accounts, a move so cold-blooded it left me scrambling to cover basic expenses while juggling legal fees. The woman who once claimed to love me now acted like a financial predator, cutting off access to funds as if trying to starve me into submission. But freezing the accounts was just the beginning. In one particularly manipulative episode, Carolyn called me late at night, sobbing hysterically and threatening to take her own life if I didn't drop the divorce. "You'll have my blood on your hands," she wailed, her voice trembling with what sounded like genuine despair, but I knew better. This wasn't about remorse or regret, it was another tactic to regain control. She had always been a master of emotional warfare, and this was her latest weapon, guilt wrapped in self-destruction. For days afterward, I couldn't shake the image of her voice echoing through the phone line, even though logic told me she was bluffing. Still, the psychological toll was real. It kept me awake at night, wondering how far she'd go to ruin me. And then there was her relentless game of legal cat and mouse. Every time we thought we were nearing resolution, Carolyn would switch lawyers again, each new attorney more aggressive than the last. One week, she'd claim she couldn't find critical documents. The next, she'd insist on re-evaluating every single asset down to the mismatched silverware in the kitchen drawer. Her delays weren't random, they were strategic, designed to bleed me dry financially and emotionally. Each hearing felt like stepping into quicksand, pulling us deeper into a vortex of bureaucracy and frustration. By the time Lucas, my lawyer, finally managed to push things forward, I was exhausted, not just from fighting Carolyn but from resisting the creeping paranoia that she might never let me go. Every setback felt like a fresh wound, reopening scars I thought were healing. And yet, despite her best efforts, Carolyn's schemes only hardened my resolve. If anything, they made me more determined to break free from her toxic grip, for good. It was supposed to be a perfect Saturday afternoon. Emma and I had just finished shopping and were heading back to her car in the mall parking lot, laughing about which movie to watch that evening. The sun was setting, casting golden hues across the asphalt, when everything changed in an instant. A deafening roar shattered the calm, a car engine revving like a predator on the hunt. Before I could fully process what was happening, the vehicle came hurtling toward us at breakneck speed, its headlights glaring like eyes of malice. My heart stopped as I realized it wasn't random, this was deliberate. Carolyn. I barely had time to react. Grabbing Emma's arm, I yanked her out of the way, but the car clipped her leg with brutal force. The sickening crunch of bone echoed through the air, followed by Emma's agonized scream. Blood began pooling beneath her leg, dark and ominous against the pale concrete. Her face twisted in pain, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clutched her shattered limb. And then came the sound that still haunts me, the screech of burning rubber as the car slammed into reverse, preparing for another attack. Carolyn didn't stop. She floored the accelerator again, aiming straight for us without hesitation. Panic surged through my veins as I dragged Emma between two parked cars, her cries of anguish piercing the chaos. The impact shook the ground as her car collided violently with the vehicles shielding us, setting off a cacophony of blaring alarms. Each second felt like an eternity, adrenaline pounding in my ears as I shielded Emma with my body, praying we wouldn't become targets again. When the driver's door finally opened, Carolyn stepped out, immaculately composed despite the carnage she'd caused. Her heels clicked against the pavement, each step a countdown to madness. For the first time, I saw the true extent of her rage, not the woman I once loved, but a stranger consumed by hatred. As the investigation into Carolyn's attempted murder unfolded, a chilling discovery emerged that sent shivers down my spine. The police, while combing through her belongings, found something I never expected, a detailed journal outlining her obsessive plans for revenge. It wasn't just a fleeting thought or an emotional outburst, it was a calculated blueprint of destruction, filled with dates, times, and locations where she had followed Emma and me. Each entry read like a horror story, detailing how she stalked us during seemingly innocent outings, coffee runs, grocery trips, even walks in the park. She had been watching us for months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. What made this revelation even more horrifying was the precision of her notes. She documented every interaction we had, how Emma laughed at my jokes, how we held hands, even what she wore on specific days. One page stood out. Today, they looked so happy. He smiled at her the way he used to smile at me. Beneath those words were sketches of violent fantasies, arrows pointing to stick figures labeled as him and her, with red ink splattered across the page like blood. It was clear that Carolyn's jealousy wasn't just about losing me, it was about annihilating any happiness I might find without her. The most unsettling part? Her entries revealed multiple missed opportunities where she could have acted sooner but chose to wait, savoring the anticipation of our demise. This wasn't just rage, it was cruelty wrapped in patience. Every word felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. Carolyn wasn't just angry, she was playing God with our lives. The courtroom fell silent as the judge delivered Carolyn's sentence, 12 years for premeditated attempted murder. To my astonishment, she showed no sign of remorse, her composure was chillingly intact, as if the verdict were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. As the bailiff led her away, her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. There was no regret in her gaze, only a cold, calculated warning, a promise that this wasn't over. It was as though she believed prison was just another obstacle to overcome, not a punishment. Even after the trial ended, that look haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her icy stare burning into my memory, reminding me that freedom from her would never truly feel safe. Emma noticed it too. She stopped laughing at jokes about moving on and started double-checking locks every night. We both knew Carolyn wasn't the type to let anything go, not her grudges, not her obsessions, and certainly not us. Her lawyer had argued for leniency, citing emotional distress, but everyone in that room could see through the facade. This woman didn't act out of passion or madness, she planned, plotted, and executed her rage with surgical precision. Before being escorted out, Carolyn turned slightly toward Emma, lips curling into a faint smirk. "See you soon," she mouthed silently, her voiceless threat echoing louder than any scream ever could. That moment cemented something inside me. We'd won the battle, but the war might never truly end. Now, even with restraining orders and concealed carry permits, paranoia lingers like a shadow. Every creak of the floorboards feels heavier, every stranger lingering near our building seems suspicious. Carolyn may be behind bars, but her presence looms larger than ever.